Lorentzsen Center. On March 15th, we will be hosting the Faith and Work Half-Day Conference, which is focusing on the theme of employee care through chaplains in the workplace. Workplace or corporate chaplains serve the needs of employees, the spiritual, social, psychological needs of employees. And the present-day iteration of workplace chaplains happens on factory floors and office cubicles and wherever employees may be found, and also extends that care to the families of employees as invited. Whereas a chaplain may be officially hired to minister by walking around for 20 hours a week, most chaplains can tell you that they're on call anytime they're needed, wherever employees call them. So we will hear from chaplains, local chaplains like Steve Street over there and from Eventide, chaplains from Alexandria Industries and other businesses in Alexandria, Minnesota. And our opening keynote will be Steve Cook, who is a chaplain and chaplain services provider. In other words, he runs an organization that provides chaplains to local businesses based out of Madison. Our luncheon keynote will be Dan Malmstrom, who currently runs North Point Professionals, a consultancy organization. And Dan has been very intimately involved in the workplace chaplaincy scene in Alexandria. And in between the opening keynote and the luncheon keynote, we shall get in dialogue with business leaders who have chaplains in their organizations, as well as chaplains themselves. So I urge you to come and learn about how chaplains facilitate employee care. That's March 15th. You've got cards on your tables as reminders. And now for our speaker for today. Jody Bock is founder of Box Office Transformational Consulting, where since 2005, she has been providing coaching, speaking, facilitation, development, and delivery of customized workshops and seminars in the areas of leadership, communication, and she's sitting with her communication professor right there, and accountability. She came to see whether you really got it right. She's a 1985 Concordia graduate where she earned a double major in English and communications, and she was an All-American basketball player and is a proud member of the Concordia Athletic Hall of Fame. Jody holds certifications in life purpose and career coaching, extreme leadership facilitation, life success consulting, psych K facilitation. You're gonna have to tell us what all these things are. Yeah? Okay. And accelerated innovation facilitation. She's the author of several books and blogs at boktalks.com. When she's not writing, coaching, or speaking, Jody is probably singing with the City of Lakes chorus. She promised to sing today. I thought I'd set you up. And it's an award-winning barbershop chorus. Or she keeps busy as the head scorekeeper for NDSU men's and women's basketball teams. Jody?
You do not want me to sing because I sing in a chorus for a reason. I am not a solo singer. Although I did get a chance to sing the national anthem with a friend last Wednesday at Concordia's basketball game, which was really fun. So, who knew? Huh. When I played basketball at Concordia, I didn't know I could sing. So that's a relatively new discovery for me. So thank you, Dr. Faith, for inviting me into this conversation today. I am so blessed to be able to share some insights and some of my journey along the path to becoming conscious. And as I'm talking about this journey, I've not been able to come up with a better word than journey. So I say that word a lot. I'm going to say journey, path. And when I say that, think about your own experience of awakening to your own leadership role. Whether you have a title, position, tenure, none of that matters. Because as we start to awaken to our own place in the world, that's part of what it means to become conscious. So it was just over a year ago in January of 2018 that I discovered this book, Becoming a Conscious Leader, How to Lead Successfully in a World That's Waking Up. And it's a good thing I didn't know how long this book was. I was reading it on Kindle, and it just took forever to get through it because it's fat. When you're reading on a Kindle, you never really know how far you are in the book, which is probably a good thing. This was so compelling to me, this study of this book. And it took me the entire year of 2018 to digest these concepts. But as I did that, I realized that I've been slowly waking up for most of my career. So I'd like to share that, just pieces of that journey with you, in the hope that there might be some ideas you can use on your own journey wherever you are in that. So when I think back, because after all, that's the only way you can ever connect the dots, is looking back, as Steve Jobs tells us, I see that every decision I made, every pothole along the road, every detour that might have seemed to take me off the path has actually been happening for me and not to me. That's an idea that has continued to evolve as I've often thought of myself as a lone wolf on this journey, trying desperately to fit in instead of to stand out. Now that might seem kind of odd when I come clean with my journey, because I think I did a good job of faking fitting in. But the way I did that, I think, was to shave off the square corners so that I could fit in whatever the round hole was. Brené Brown is one of my favorite authors, and I'll tell you more about her as we go. She talks about a fitting in culture, where curiosity is seen as weakness and asking questions equates to antagonism, rather than truly being valued as learning. That could be a total story I made up at some point, but I believed that was true. At some point in my early years, I began to believe that it wasn't okay to ask questions. And so I became what I consider myself now to be a recovering perfectionist along the way, because I didn't think it was okay to ask questions. Whether this is actually true or not isn't really the point. It's the perception of those of us who believed, and maybe some of us who still do believe, that fitting in is the only option. Even now, it's become relatively common to use the terms with me or against me perspective during times of significant emotional stress. If you're not with me, you must be against me. And I'm speaking to you as a former basketball player who believed that if I wasn't the winner, that there was something wrong. There's a winner-loser mentality in basketball, which is what I understood it to be. That's part of the evolution. This forces people always to take sides and to forget that other perspectives do exist. It's emotion-driven, and it often results in more upset than in acceptance. But I digress. Okay, so this is my story, and I share it with you to invite you into a dialogue today where, if, at least for the time we're together, we can agree to suspend any previous assumptions we might have had when we came in, so that together we can learn and grow. We'll have a little opportunity as we go to talk at your table about a topic, because that's what happens in leadership when we learn with each other. So I am an English major. I think once an English major, always an English major. I guess that's what Garrison Keillor used to say. So I'm going to not even apologize for my love of words, but I have two words that I'd like to give you a distinction, a way to think about differently. And I think a lot of people use these two words interchangeably. People have called me a motivational speaker in the past. Oh, we need you to come and motivate our people. And I hope a lot that I'm not a motivational speaker, because in my experience, motivation comes from fear. It's an external push. Now, there are times and places for motivation for sure. If I'm up here and I see a fire breaking out in that corner, I'm not going to have a dialogue about fire being bad, right? Or I'm going to motivate you to do something. But motivation is external. Inspiration is internal. And this is an important distinction, at least it has become to me, when I first learned about this from Lance Secretan, who is another author speaker who I respect and admire. Many people believe their role as a leader is to motivate others to achieve something. But look at the greatest leaders in history. If we made a list of the greatest leaders in history, we could come up with a list of people like Jesus, Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela. These people didn't have as their principal focus to get somebody to do something. They practiced a way of being which inspired, not motivated, others to change themselves, which then over time, changed the world. So if motivation is external, inspiration is internal. And it comes from the Latin word meaning spirit, to breathe, to give life, to infuse with a divine influence. So I hope that you can see the distinction for yourself in your own journey through what I'll be sharing with you today. There is a time and place for motivation for sure, but don't forget that there could also be a time and place to inspire through the way you be. So since this is my journey and I get to tell you about the people who have been influential along the way, I'm going to share with you some authors I've read and studied who have made a big difference. One of them I've already mentioned, Brene Brown. I know there are people in the room who are here because of Brene Brown, Sarah. Hey, good to see you. Who said to me, I'm coming because I love this book that her most recent book is Dare to Lead. And she says in the book before that, which I find really fascinating, the universe is not short on wake-up calls. We're just quick to hit the snooze button. And I wonder how many of us hit that snooze button when things start to become new to us and we start to wake up to our leadership opportunities. It's so much easier to hit the snooze button. And that concept to me, when I look back, I probably did that for a lot of years. Instead of waking up, I'm sure I did this. So this was significant to me. Another person who was significant to me, even though I've never met him, is a man named Edgar Mitchell. Has anybody ever heard of Edgar Mitchell? Unfortunately for him, we should know who he is, because Edgar Mitchell was the lunar module pilot of Apollo 14 and the 6th person ever to walk on the moon. Fortunately for him, he was also a next-door neighbor to Wayne Dyer at one point. And Wayne Dyer is another one of my heroes in leadership and communication. And Wayne Dyer tells a story about Edgar Mitchell, which I find to be fascinating in this whole realm of waking up and becoming more conscious. Mitchell recalls the time when, as the command module hurtled homeward, he watched the Earth, moon, and sun passing by the window of the rotating capsule in 2-minute intervals. Can you imagine that perspective of the Earth, so small he could put his thumb on it? Nothing in any of his training had equipped him for a sudden discovery like this of the oneness of all things. He said it was a subjective, visceral experience accompanied by ecstasy. And what he had in that moment when he realized all the things that were dragging him down on the earth were so insignificant, he had a satori, which is a Japanese Buddhist term for an instant awakening, a comprehension of something new. And if we ever have that happen to us in that moment of instant awakening, we know what that feels like. He said, this is interesting, this is what Wayne Dyer had said about the NASA program. In the Apollo years, NASA sent military test pilots into space, not poets or preachers. Yet they came back with possession of extraordinary knowledge that by dint of personality or professional inclination, they seemed helpless to communicate. How do you talk about that kind of an experience when you get back to the Earth that was so small you could cover it up with your thumb? As the Gemini and Apollo astronaut Michael Collins once put it, it was not within our ken to share emotions or to utter extraneous information. Asked what it was like to go to the moon, Apollo 12's Pete Conrad replied, "Super, really enjoyed it." But then there was Mitchell. There was Edgar Mitchell. After returning to the Earth, he left NASA, grew a beard, and started the Institute of Noetic Sciences, which advocated exploring the universe by means of inquiry that lay outside of science and religion. He had a satori that changed his entire view of life. This could certainly be considered an awakening. So I can't have an awakening of my own without calling attention to Albert Einstein, probably one of the greatest thinkers of our time. And he's the guy who said, we can't solve our current problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. And that, if you sit on that quote for a while, you'll be like, oh, yeah, I got to think about that. You know, Henry Ford was the guy who said, thinking is the hardest work people are ever going to do, which is probably the reason so few people do it. Yet if we're not willing to think about things differently, we're going to keep getting the same thing we've got. And he also said, he's also the guy who said, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results is, it's insanity and madness in Africa. Okay. But it's insanity, it's madness. Albert Einstein told us that. So he's on my list of people who have helped me wake up. Another guy I got to know, not in real life, but through study, is a guy named Buckminster Fuller. I learned the law of precession, where the effect of bodies in motion has an effect on other bodies in motion. There's a lot more to what Buckminster Fuller studied than I can tell you in this short amount of time, but I love this quote. He says, to inspire change, inspire change, we need to create an alternative paradigm that is more appealing than the current one. We as humans will only change when the pain of change becomes less than the pain of staying the same, right? We like our comfort. We're comfort-seeking creatures. So if we want people to awaken, become conscious, and do something different, we have to create some kind of paradigm that's more appealing than the comfortable one. So I love his philosophy. And then there's Peter Block. Peter Block, who is a community organizer. He lives in Cincinnati, loves his community, and has also written 3 books that I love. One is Freedom and Accountability at Work, which talks about how everybody wants freedom at work, but nobody wants to be accountable to it. Oh, brilliant. And he also wrote a book called Community, The Structure of Belonging. Love that book too. In fact, Lori, I think I gave that to the City of Moorhead. At some point, we want to get people to study this book because it's so amazing. But the book that probably had the biggest impact on me was a book called The Answer to How is Yes. And in that book, he says, transformation comes more from pursuing profound questions than from seeking practical answers. And I went, what? I've been doing it wrong the whole time? I thought it was all about finding the right answer. I've spent my whole life trying to be right, trying to be accepted, trying to fit into that stupid little round hole. You mean if I had better questions, I could have been on the path to transformation sooner? So Peter Block is a big part of my transformation. Another guy I love is Steve Farber. Now, Steve Farber I've met in person. He's written several leadership books, including one of my favorites, The Radical Leap, which talks about extreme leadership. You heard in my introduction that I am a certified facilitator of extreme leadership. And I love extreme leadership because it's the interplay of fear and love, 2 of the most powerful forces in the human experience. I learned that from Steve as a facilitator, and I continue to learn about that interplay in my work with organizations. Those who actively and intentionally use the experience of fear and love every day in their attempt to change things for the better in whatever arena are what Steve calls extreme leaders. And so he says that extreme leaders cultivate love, generate energy, inspire audacity, and provide proof, and that's the radical leap. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end, because I have an event coming up you might be interested in. So I met Steve. I know Steve. He's my friend. So I do have a personal connection. And then there came Gina Hayden, January of 2018, just a little over 1 year ago. She has done so much research and work in this concept of conscious leadership that I will never be able to tell you enough. I'm so taken by this, and I'd love to just explore it at some point with you on a deeper level. But she says business has the potential to be a huge force for good in the world. I'm betting that most of us who are here today believe that's true, or you wouldn't be here. We can use our businesses as a way to increase consciousness and make the world a better place. I love that concept. Now, I have not met Gina in person, but I did have a chance to interview her for my podcast. So I think probably episode 5 of my podcast, Bach Talks, is my interview with Gina. She was sitting in London in a club right there. I guess they call them clubs. It was a little noisy, and I don't know exactly what they were doing, but I was in Fargo in my home office when we had our conversation. And so she tells us that it's no longer enough for us to simply sprinkle more content on top of our existing leadership mindsets and expect to flourish in our leadership roles. Just as we can't run new software on old operating systems and expect a great performance, what's needed in leadership is an upgrade of our operating system itself. She says this upgrade is conscious leadership. So this is exciting to me because I understand from my work as a consultant in business that there is another way to do business besides competition and warfare, where there has to be a winner and a loser, and us against them. There is another way to do this. There are movements to support the shift in worldview dedicated to rethinking what we mean by doing good business. And so Gina's study shares these two important views. The first is that business, we have to believe that it's possible for business to have a higher purpose in the world than simply making a profit. And we need to understand that business needs to take responsibility for its impact on the world and factor this into the way it conducts its profit-making activities. There's nothing wrong with making a profit. Even nonprofits or not-for-profit organizations, if you're not making money and dealing with money, then you're not doing it right. It's not about not making money. It's not about having a negative relationship with money. It's about understanding this in a new way for some of us. So let me talk about leadership for a second from my own perspective and the headiness of being a leader. I had a great opportunity as a 19-year-old freshman at Concordia to be on the national championship basketball team. And where do you go from there when you're a freshman? It's pretty hard to reproduce that. But it's kind of a heady experience. We got to do a lot of fun things, Dr. Dovery, didn't we? That was fun. Those were fun days, those of you who knew us then. But it's kind of, it's fun. It can become kind of not a drug so much as something you want to do again. I want to be part of that again. I want to be in that space of having people see me on the street and say hello and know who I am. So I know from my basketball experience that that can happen. And these guys probably know a thing or two about the effects ego can have on a career. You may not know who all these people are, but they are people from, like Bernie Madoff is up there. You've probably heard of him. Jeffrey Skilling from Enron. These people all spent some time in prison because their ego got the best of them. This is the old way of being in business. We all suffer from emotional issues about money and blind spots about what money is and whether we are its servants or its masters. So said John Freeman in his book Reinventing Capitalism, How We Broke Money and How We Fix It from Inside and Out. And John Freeman was mentioned in Gina Hayden's work. And that is so important. Wayne Dyer actually had an acronym for ego. Does anybody know? Has anybody heard his acronym? EGO, edging God out. We are all well aware of the big ego that has us be more than what we were created to be. That's relatively easy to spot. But there's another dimension of ego that would have us play smaller than we were created to play. The one that says being a martyr is the way to go. It's not about me, it's about everyone else. That has the same effect on who you're created to be because you're saying, no, God, I've got it. I'll take it from here. I'll just play small. There's a place in the middle where we can step into our greatness by becoming conscious of our purpose that I know can have a huge impact on the world. So in order to break free from ego's hold on us, whether that's big ego or little ego, we must upgrade our beliefs about business and change our level of consciousness about it. So we as leaders, we can struggle with our own consciousness and our own journeys in this. So why should we be surprised when the people we lead might have a difficult journey too? I was hired one time to fix a group of employees. Somebody hired me and said, we want you to come in and fix 4 people. We have 4 people that need fixing. And I was new, and it was my first opportunity, and I was desperate, let's just be honest. I needed a client. So I said, okay, I'll come and fix your people. Wow, I'm so glad I learned that early. Because without understanding that agitation is what allows people to pop in their awareness, just like popcorn in a bowl, I might have not learned that lesson till later. You know, no surprise, he was the problem. The leader of that organization was the problem because he expected his people to be different without taking that journey himself. Just like popcorn in a pan, we all pop at different times. Our awareness hits us at different times with different catalysts, I guess, to make us get it. Just like that spoon that stirs. And you notice in the popcorn analogy, some of those popcorn kernels that pop outside of the pan. Look, there's some that are right there that are leaving. You have to be okay with the fact that if people are popping in their awareness, they might leave your organization. And on the other side of that, it's relatively obvious that there are some who will never pop, right? There are going to be those left in the bottom of. Now, when we eat popcorn, we typically will shuffle those out. At some point, it might be advantageous to everyone to free people up to find what's really making them come alive, and that might not be with your organization. But you can do that in a different way when you're conscious and aware, and that becomes a loving option. So let's talk about this journey to consciousness. The roadmap of characteristics and qualities of those leaders who are leading consciously can be a useful navigational tool for all of us. And it starts with being conscious leaders. It starts with us as leaders in whatever role you have, whatever space you are, go first. Conscious leaders lead to conscious organizations. Conscious organizations, over time perhaps, will start attracting conscious employees. And when we have conscious organizations, that's how we wake up the world. And it doesn't have to be a daunting experience. In fact, it might be when the heat's turned on under you in the pan of popcorn that you pop even if you don't mean to. That's kind of what happened to me. I'm sort of an accidental awake person because I fought it for so long. Only in looking back can I say, wow, this is where I've been all along. So leaders set the tone of cultures. They influence people through their decisions. They set direction. They make choices that impact perhaps millions of people. So for a business to evolve, the leader needs to evolve. It can't be someone who says, Jody, come and fix my people. What happened in that organization? Of the 12 employees, 4 of them he wanted me to fix. 3 of the 4 of them left almost immediately after we worked together and gave them a coaching plan to work on for themselves. And they said, what? And they became the popcorn that popped out of the pan. So I'm not in good standing with that boss because we don't jive. We're not on the same level of understanding, and it's all good. There's no judgment in consciousness. It just is. So I want to share with you some qualities of conscious leaders so you can ask yourself, is this something that I'm feeling? Is this something that I know people maybe that are on this journey? And as I'm not as young as I used to be, I need glasses. So just a second. So I'm just going to share with you a little bit about conscious leader characteristics. They feel a deeply held sense of connectedness, of life, and of connection with others. So ask yourself, do I feel this, or have I felt this? They feel a sense of service to others and the world. They have a feeling that there is no separation between our spirituality and our personal and professional lives. Wouldn't it be great if we could bring our whole selves to work? Instead of waiting in the car to rejoin after work hours? If the best part of ourselves is waiting in the car and we're not taking it to work, there's a disconnect. An ability to live life in the present moment and accept reality as it is. The ability to hold more than one perspective at the same time and to work with paradoxes and think outside of those either-or boxes. The capacity to set intentions but be detached from outcomes. Oh my gosh, that's a big one. It's so easy to get attached. They should do it like this. This is what I want to happen. I have a vision and I'm going to make sure they do this. Is not consciousness. What if you could be detached from the outcomes because you trust so much in the people you have in your organization? That's consciousness. and they experience life with genuine joy, gratitude, and a life-affirming attitude. This is so fun to be in the midst of. And when you understand it in a different way, you start attracting it too. And it's just different conversations. So here's the four zone model of conscious leadership from the book. And I'm just going to go through this really quickly because there's so much I could tell you and not enough time ever. So and by the way, I'm just going to share with you how I studied this book. This is so nerdy, so nerdy. These notebooks I buy like by the boatload at the beginning of school year because they're like 2 for $1 or something. I have so many of these, and I had to color code these because this book took 2 notebooks when I was studying it for the last year. So I'm going to just share with you some of my notes as I went through this 4-zone area. So the first zone, if you look down or look at the top left, is self-mastery. So it should be no surprise that if we're going to lead a conscious organization, it has to start with ourselves. So this is awareness of how our own ego plays itself out in our lives. I hope some way you can start being aware of that. And ego is a result of fear of not being enough, fear of them finding out that I'm faking it. That was my journey. I had this fear. And in self-mastery, we start to understand that reacting to events based on our automatic conditioning and unconscious fear reactions and survival drivers will produce a result that might not be the best for us or the people we're leading. This process changes the very nature of our thinking itself. To see how we are seeing is really cool. I had a coach I hired early in this process to help me, and she kept asking me, Jody, notice what you notice. And I said, notice what are you talking about? Notice what you notice. Because I'm a literal English major, right? That doesn't make sense. And she kept saying, just notice what draws your attention. Notice what you notice. And that was the process that I got to where I could actually kind of watch myself do things instead of be at the mercy of other people's direction of me. So it's called the observer effect. And in this zone, you have the opportunity to do that. You become deeply connected to your individual and organizational purpose. Chuck Hoagie, I'm looking at you because you get this. And we're on the same page. Do people know that you're on a new journey? Or can I announce that for you? It's in the forum. Oh, well then it's forum official. So Chuck's on a journey looking for his next iteration of himself. And we both spoke at an event a couple weeks ago that was really neat because it's bigger than what we do. It's who we are. And so in this stage, we become anchored in values, which provides the framework for our decision making. We are committed to continuous learning and our own personal evolution. We develop our spiritual intelligence, which is the ability to act with wisdom and compassion while maintaining inner and outer peace regardless of the circumstances. Oh, such a great journey. And it starts with self-mastery. So that's the upper left. The bottom left, then, is conscious relating. Where self-mastery is about me, conscious relating is about we. And conscious leaders remain self-aware during their interactions with others. We practice being present. We have particular attitudes toward power, control, and responsibility. We don't micromanage at this stage. And we allow people to show up in a space of their own greatness. It's a process. We seek multiple points of view and are concerned with holding the space for wisdom to emerge instead of feeling we always need to put it in. This hit me so big about 2 years ago, this whole concept of holding space for wisdom to emerge instead of putting it in. And I found a term. I discovered it somewhere. The term is Aisu Matak. Aisu Matak is an Inuit term for the person who holds the space for wisdom to emerge. So last Labor Day, last September, I had it tattooed on my arm to remind me that my journey is being an Aisu Matak. I need reminders, and I needed a physical reminder, so I don't try to always shove things in as a recovering perfectionist would do. So for me, that was huge, this whole concept of allowing people to show up. So then the third one is systems insight, which is the upper right-hand corner. And this is when conscious leaders are focused inwardly and outwardly. They are future thinking and visionary. They act in responsible ways and encourage responsibility in others. They adopt a wider stakeholder-oriented mindset. Where growth mindset is part of the higher picture, it's not an end in itself. They see and recognize synchronicity and use intuition or inner wisdom to help them make decisions. And right on that banner over there, there's a word that's really important in this process. It's discernment. And discernment invokes a higher power in the decision making. And when we get to this stage, we realize we're not in this alone. We are simply containers for that spirit to come through us. And then we can attract people who are looking for the same thing we are and may not even know it. These people at this stage care passionately about life. They truly believe that business can be a frontier to achieve a positive future. And then, bottom right is collective responsibility. Conscious leaders see life as one continuous, interconnected whole. They see business, life, and nature as one connected entity. Conscious leaders have the capacity to contribute to the greater good and to lead more consciously. So that's the 4-zone conscious leadership model that I fell in love with last January. And I'm still working through it. That's why I'm reading the notes here, because I don't want to miss anything. I want to be able to tell you how I'm learning while I'm learning. So I do have a caution. And maybe this is a caution to me more than it is to any of you, because as a recovering perfectionist, I have a tendency to want to get it right. And this process is not something you get right and you do it perfectly. Although this may seem daunting, the idea is progress, not perfection. We're dynamic beings on an evolutionary journey. And there's not an end point when we really understand this, because together we're creating something that doesn't exist. We're not following someone else's roadmap. We're creating it as we go. Another book I've studied in my mastermind group, Lori, is Building the Bridge as You Walk on It. There's no bridge in front of us when we're trailblazers in this realm of conscious leadership. We're building it as we walk on it. So don't get perfectionistic. Just use these questions that we're talking about to move yourself. So we've got a little bit of time, and I have a question I'd like you to talk about at your tables, because I think what has happened to many of us, me included as a basketball player, I believe that success means winning. And that's the picture I've had of the term success. So I'm curious, at your tables, what is your definition of success? How would you define that as it relates to your role in business or in your life? So I'll give you 5 minutes or so to talk about that at your tables, and then we'll reconvene. Oh yeah, and I forgot to tell you about the handout on your table, so. Oh. There is so much great dialogue happening. I just want to notice for you that I believe, from just overhearing some of what you're talking about, that this is actual dialogue. And dialogue is suspending previous assumptions in order to learn from each other. So if we came in with our own view of what success is and wanted to get it out, that would not be dialogue, that would be discussion. Discussion comes from the same root as percussion, concussion. I have an idea, and here it is. And that, again, is a learned opportunity as well to be in dialogue, be willing to suspend assumptions for the purpose of learning. We're so conditioned not to do that. So I'm curious, there is a mic, I think, somewhere, right, Faith? Did you guys come up with any great definitions of success at your tables? Oh, we have a pointed right here.
I asked the question, is success being able to learn from your failures? When we look at Thomas Edison in terms of how many times he failed, but he succeeded each time. Babe Ruth said, for every home run I hit, I had to strike out 3 times. Charles Lindbergh crashed. He redesigned the plane and took off from where he crashed. He succeeded in the end, but he learned from what didn't work. Abraham Lincoln failed so bad in business, 17 years to pay back his debts.
So,
We didn't hear that.
right, so what I hear you saying is we don't actually succeed our way to success, we fail our way to success. Right? Because if they were done, they did it right the first time, there would be no opportunity to learn anything.
All right.
So I love that. Well, that's what I heard. I don't know. Maybe that was just me. Thank you. That's great. I love that. Anybody else? Yeah, right here. Dick.
Talking about joyfulness in the workplace, and we were talking about some things that are being done recently with students that they're actually having happiness
What? Students
courses
are
now
happiness?
at Ivy League schools
Wow.
because they found out that so many students were unhappy and have developed a curriculum to try to deal with this issue. And I'm sort of thinking that maybe a part of what my definition of success would be is being happy, being joyful. Not necessarily just having a bunch of money
Yeah.
or being in charge of something, but actually having an inner happiness and joy.
It just sounds so simple, doesn't it?
Yeah,
And it's
really.
not for some reason. Thank you. That's brilliant. I love that. Anybody? Lori?
I'm only going to say this because it feeds so perfectly into what you just said. And I don't know who the quote is from. It's some proverb from something or another. Happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony. And we talked a lot at our table about what is, can you be a consistent person throughout your life? Can you bring your best self to work? We talked a lot about relationships and how important that is to that feeling of contentment as well.
Well, may I just say thank you for that. You guys are right on par because you are talking exactly about what the research has shown in this book. So the people who were interviewed in this book, there were 20 people interviewed from all over the world, and you have some of them on your handout. They realized, or they defined success in certain ways, and I'm going to just read you a little bit of what they said who are interviewed in this, which means that you are all conscious leaders, yay, on a path to waking up. So there's a guy named Paul Cleal, a partner in PwC, and he sees success as being about making a difference. Making a difference means that other people recognize that you have created value for them, is what he says. Dominic Suwila is Deputy CEO of Barlow World Limited in South Africa, and he says, there is a huge difference between success and significance. For me, success is a simplified thing where people have set themselves targets, financial or otherwise, and when they achieve those milestones, they celebrate it and say, I've been successful. Significance is more challenging. It's about making a difference and more. And then there is, I'm not French, Jean-Francois Zobrist, the CEO of Favi Enterprises, an engineering firm in northern France, who says, success is where workers, clients, and shareholders are happy. And it is in that order, because it is the happy worker who makes a client happy, and it's a happy client that makes a happy shareholder. So there is a whole section on their definition of success as it relates to being a conscious leader, and you nailed it. Everything we talked about here is in support of the research. So, yay us. And you're failing your way to success next door by breaking stuff. That's how it works. So, as a conscious leader then, we can kind of identify ourselves in this room. We realize that by virtue of our being human, we will have 3 conditions that need to be met in order for us to move forward on our journey. You've heard it said we need to be ready, willing, and able, right? You're here today, so you're at least somewhat ready to learn more. Also, by your interest in being here today, you're demonstrating your ability to learn and grow. The only condition you will need to determine as you go forward is your own willingness. You have to bring that. And we have a comment over here. Right behind you, to your right. There we go.
You make me wonder a little bit because I have my 19th book coming out now. And when I look back at it, it's really repetition of 1,000 books that I have read and 900 people I have interviewed.
Well, I should be up here talking about you. This is great.
And I'm thinking about it. I'm holding the 19th book and the 18th and 19th book back because I just think, well, how are they going to look at this? What are they going to do with it? And all of you people right here are very close to it and know what they are and that. And the really strange thing about it is I had a wife who was brilliant. And she was young, and she was my editor. And I had a real advantage as a writer to have an internal editor. It was just tremendous, and she could pick out words, she could tell me sentences, and she could do a thing. I remember one time I said, "What are we going to have for dinner tonight?" "Oh, we'll have something." 15 minutes later, there's a dinner on the plate. And we have talked about the things, what's happening, side by side. It was a really great thing. And then the other thing I look at is my advisors in my degrees. And this is rather interesting because the first advisor that I had that was really top-notch was down at Minnesota. And he saw that I had an interest in agriculture. So he assigned me to write 3 master's papers on the success of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, which was the breadbasket of the 13 colonies. And it just worked, and things fell together. And then the thing that really got me, and the man right here is a part of that whole thing, because I said, I have to quit second semester teaching because I've got too much writing to do. Yeah. And he knew that the writing was doing some good with that, and so he gave me second semester off each year, except doing something that was pretty novel at Concordia at the time, and that was teach a 3-hour Monday night class, 3 hours, and they'd come in, I'd give them a halfway break, and they'd come in with chocolate and Coca-Cola in their hands eating, and I thought, how are you guys going to sleep tonight? And they all said, oh, this is no problem. We'll get to sleep. You know, and they did. And I ended up with 1,000 books. And this is the interesting part about it. I realized I was wasting my time when I was traveling from one state to another. And what am I doing with my time? So I ended up, and on my first trip, I read 4 books. Because I was doing 2 speaking engagements on that trip, and I didn't want to fool around with the crowd or anything like that. Because that time, this is a little aside, but at that time, a very beautiful woman attracted me, and came up to me and talked to me. And I just couldn't figure this out. And then I realized she was a prostitute.
Wow, our stories are
You know,
so interesting, aren't they?
So then I realized, well, I'm learning here.
There you go. That's right. That's right. That's the journey part that I was talking about.
That was down in Las Vegas, and of course, that I knew why there was a mirror in my ceiling
Oh
in
my
my
goodness.
room.
Okay, too much information. And now, back to consciousness. No, but I love what you're saying because it's your journey. And all of that you're talking about is what I think each of us can probably relate to in some way about our own journey to awareness and awakeness. And how do we come back together? What do we do with what we know? If we don't have it, if we only have it in our head and it doesn't come into our heart and into our hands, it doesn't make a difference in the world.
But I have one question now.
Okay.
And that question is, my 19th book is going to be what I learned in reading 1,000 books and interviewing 900 people.
Wow.
And I'm beginning to wonder if I should do that.
I say yes.
I mean, it's really bothering me. It really bothers me now because that's all I am doing is repeating what I've learned.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't. Did you hear anything really remarkably new today? It might be the way it's packaged, the way it's put together. Everything wise has probably been said at some point in the world. It's not the way you have experienced it and what you have done. When you really understand this consciousness, there's a gift inside all of us. And if we're not listening to that gift, then we're not living our lives truly conscious. So it's going to be different for all of us, each of us. We need to bring the willingness. And thank you for sharing that story because it shows all of us that it's all about waking up. We either get to get better at the dream or we get to actually wake up from it. Because many of us just dream. We dream about maybe someday this will happen and we don't really wake up. So there's so much more I could tell you. There's so much more advice in here. Oh, but one story, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So this is Carrie Underwood on the left. Carrie Underwood, when she decided to audition on American Idol. And in her mind, she was thinking, this is stupid. What chance do I have? And on the right is her 12 years later at the CMAs, where we all know what happened with Carrie Underwood. How often are we filled with self-doubt, and how many times does the conversation end there? If Carrie Underwood had believed her little ego, her little voice who said, what chance do I have? And look at her. She's transformed her whole self in those 12 years. The world would have missed out on her gift. And the world will miss out on your gift or your book or your song or your art or whatever it is that's been put inside of you if you let that little ego win. Waking up, becoming conscious is all about allowing yourself to hear yourself. So there's a lot more I could say. I'm going to zip through these because I'm going to get to the last slide and just show you there's advice. I want to get to this. So I know this is a heavy topic. I know there's a lot of information in this. There's information in form. It's right here in this book. It's on your handout. A lot of form. I'm hopeful that there's also some inspiration in spirit that might have moved you in some way to think about something differently, to maybe take something out of this room, because insight's awesome in the room, but it's what happens outside the room that really makes the difference. So I'd like to open it up to any questions, comments, insights anybody might have on the topic of conscious leadership. And there's back in the back. Not that I know the answers at all, but we'll see.
Hi, so first of all, merci beaucoup, Jody, for sharing. It's always a pleasure to see you. You're very inspiring
You too.
and motivating both.
Yeah.
So
I'll kick your butt when I need to.
I have two questions. The first one is regarding, I love the analogy of popcorns.
Yes.
How to, sadly, those that don't pop, how to perhaps push or, trigger that pop. That's my first question.
Okay.
And second is, you as an amazing, inspiring, magnetic person that you are, how do you recharge? Because sometimes, like you said, a lot of people say, oh, Jody, I need motivation, coming to you because you're known in the community. So how do you recharge, and how do you help people that don't pop to pop?
That's a great question. And I wish I knew the answer to how do I make people pop. I have been learning over my career that I can't want things for people more than they want them for themselves. That's how I get my heart broken every day, because I see potential in so many people and so many opportunities. And I'm learning the distinction between potential, which is maybe someday, and capacity, which is right now, today. And if I can have a conversation with somebody that allows them to show up as a thimble instead of a 10-gallon jug, then let's fill the thimble. And today, do everything you can today with your current understanding and fill that capacity. Because if it's not in this organization, I have a friend who says, I was freed, what would you say, freed up from my W-2 to be independent in the world. She had this really great way to say that I'd been let go. So when you're let go from a situation that doesn't feel good anyway, sometimes that's the best thing. And those pops that don't, or those kernels that don't pop in a certain situation, probably are ready to pop somewhere else. And how do I get recharged? I have a Saturday mastermind group. Every single Saturday morning for 10 years, we've been meeting at Atomic Coffee to study and talk and share and relate and communicate and get our butts kicked by each other. And that, if you don't have a mastermind group or a way to be with other people in this journey, find that, because you can't give from an empty bucket, right? So thank you for that. Anyone else?
Other questions before we get back to Hiram?
Yeah, I see it.
Before we get back to you?
Yes, right here. President Kraft.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to have you,
Thank you.
back at your
Thank you.
alma mater. And one of the things that I was thinking about, especially as I looked at that four-part chart, was that in the Judeo-Christian tradition, so many stories, English major too, by the way.
Yay.
So many stories are about what you call inspiration coming from outside. Moses doesn't want to do anything, but is urged to embrace a journey, as you would call it, that in many ways he doesn't want. Paul is on his way to do something nasty and is struck down on the road to Damascus. The disciples are catching fish and are called by Jesus. So all these things are coming, they're unexpected. And in some cases, they're actually resisted.
Right.
So how does that fit in your own understanding of being wakened?
Right.
That's my question.
Yeah. So in my journey, the hardest things I've had to learn are, in retrospect, going back and connecting the dots backwards, because I can't see it at the time. That's the best, hardest lessons. So I was going to share this, but I'll do it really fast, Jean, because it doesn't. I was going to talk about my friend Jean. We all get information all the time, and it could be a calling from God. I think it's all higher power. So for me, every information I get is from my source. You can believe that or change that however it makes sense to you. But there is always information for us to pick up. And it comes to us in 4 ways: message, lesson, problem, crisis. If we don't get the message, we'll get the lesson. And if we don't get the lesson, we'll get the problem. And if we don't get the problem, we'll get the crisis. And Jean is the one who told me about this. And she said it happens first as like a breeze blowing by your shoulder. You're doing your life, and your life is going fine, and you're doing everything, and a breeze blows by, and you say, what was that? And then you go back to doing your life. And you keep doing the things the way you were doing them. Paul keeps doing things the way he was doing them. And then you get this tap on the shoulder. Message, then a lesson. And the lesson is, hey, wake up. No, don't call me. I'm not ready. And then you go back to doing your life. And then the third one, message, lesson, problem, is like a shove against the wall. Wake up. No. And the fourth one is the steamroller, where the fourth, whatever it is, it could be a health crisis, it could be in modern times, in our way of understanding, it could be being fired. I got fired. No, if you ask anybody, they'll say it wasn't. It was mutual. But I got let go from an organization, which was the best thing that could have happened to me. But at the time, it was horrible. The last time I spoke on this stage was messing up my TEDx talk. Yes, I did. Don't not shake your head. And that was the best thing that could have happened to me in the hardest way, because it got me in a new mindset. So if we can look backward on those things that were the hardest for us, that's where we'll see in hindsight why it happened. And I have one slide that I zoomed past that I want to show you, because this is so true. God doesn't call the equipped. He equips the called. And we're all called. And you won't know that if you don't take the step toward what you really, really desire inside, if you don't wake up to the possibility. You won't see that everything you need ahead of you is there. The bridge doesn't exist, but God gives it to you if you answer that call. Whatever's inside of you, it's different for each of us. As we wake up, it's different for each of us. And I used to believe that I had to believe yours. And if I had an idea that was different from yours, then yours was right and mine was wrong, because I'm a recovering perfectionist. And when I could give that up and step into who I am and allow myself the grace that God offers me, get out of that little ego and get into the space of being and consciousness, that's what's now starting on a new journey. I'm not there. Oh my gosh, I'm not even close to there. But I'm going in a new direction where it's unfolding in front of me. And I just want to welcome all of you to consider that possibility for yourself, because you leap and the net will appear. I promise. So thanks for letting me explore this conversation with you and for being interested. There is suggested reading on your handout. There are some of the leaders interviewed in the book who are right there, so you know who we're talking about. And if you go to boxoffice.com and click on the red ticket, you'll see that we have some upcoming events that you might be interested in, including the Extreme Leadership Experience. So just so you know, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jody, for inspiring us. And thank you, everyone, for braving the mountains of snow to make it out here. I hope we shall see you next month, March 15th. Let's talk about how to care for employees, okay? Thank you very much.